So we've known for many years that record labels would like to squeeze every last dollar out of consumers, and for the most part we're kind of okay with it. I mean, we do generally get pretty good products, pretty interesting stuff. The industry has really evolved, but there's one thing that it has not been able to get past, and it is so frustrating. It has been kind of the #1 reason why I have not purchased a lot of box sets, deluxe editions, deluxe reissues of albums that I love and would really like to buy, and that is studio outtakes being pressed to vinyl. Here's why I hate it, and here's what we can do about it. This video is because recently it was announced that Blue Note would be reissuing John Coltrane's Blue Train as a tone put record. Leading up to the announcement, there was a lot of assumptions that it was going to be a box set, it was going to be 2 discs. So a lot of people thought that would be 1 disc was mono and 1 disc was stereo. It was finally announced, and it turned out that it was 2 different versions. One would be a standalone mono disc, and the other one would be a 2-disc box set, one with the stereo and one with some studio outtakes. This kind of frustrated me because this has really impacted my ability to buy records in the past. There have been a few releases, particularly over the past year, that I have just ignored because the inclusion of a second disc of studio outtakes on vinyl has meant that the record is now $15, $20 more than if it was a single record, and I know I'm never going to listen to it, or I'm going to listen to it once and then it's going to sit on my shelf, and I just don't have enough room anymore to allow that. I got to get stuff that I know I like and I don't want to listen to. I think there's 2 main reasons why they often include the studio outtakes. One is that they are trying to squeeze a little bit more money out of you. If you're willing to spend $50 on 2 records versus $35 on 1 record, that's extra money in their pocket. With that being said, though, they also think that a lot of people already own these records, so by including studio outtakes, additional stuff, that there's people who are maybe on the edge or can't rationalize rebuying a record, they're going to be able to get them to convert and buy that record. My issue with this is that vinyl fans, and especially jazz fans, Beatles fans, we have no problem buying 2, 3, 4, 5 copies of a record we really like if we think it's going to be good. Case in point, I picked this up a few years back. This is the John Coltrane Love Supreme Complete Masters. This is a 3 LP set. Very, very good pressing, sounds great. The second and third LP are things like mono reference mixes, vocal overdubs, alternate takes, breakdowns, some studio dialogue in the background. Really, really cool stuff. But I can honestly count on one finger how many times I've listened to the second and third disc of this. It's just not what I grabbed for. I mean, it has like a booklet that's kind of neat, but I mean, this just kind of sat on my shelf, and I would pull out the first disc and only the first disc, and then a couple years later, Acoustic Sounds reissued a Love Supreme, and I heard that it was supposed to be like the definitive pressing, just like so loud and just mastered unbelievably. So I spent $40 and picked this one up because I wanted it to sound the best. It didn't matter that I already owned it, and I frankly should probably get rid of the Complete Masters one I have, but I mean, that's just the way a lot of us think. So I was really excited earlier this year when this was put out, which was the John Coltrane My Favorite Things, where they did it with a mono and a stereo mix, because I was willing to spend a little bit more money for a 2-disc set. But now I'm able to compare and decide, do I like the stereo or the mono better? Granted, I don't have, a dedicated mono system, but it's interesting to see the little differences and the little nuances. And I have 2 versions of the same record that have similar source, similar mastering. Everything is an equal playing field, and I can actually make a decision which one I like more, and I can do it right there. I don't have to take up extra space on my shelf. I can get both of them right there in one package. This has been frustrating in the past because there's some really big records that we just want to have both of them there so we can compare for ourselves. I think this was for the 40th anniversary of Pet Sounds. They put out a 2-disc set that had both the mono and stereo mix. They were colored vinyl, one was green, one was yellow. I think it's really cool that they tried this, because even though this was a time when not a lot of people were buying vinyl, they knew that this is something that people would buy, and instead I've had to pick up a crappy sounding mono pressing and a crappier sounding stereo pressing, where I can't really make that assumption. I'm gonna have to put up a lot of money if I want the analog production stereo and mono versions, if I want to actually do a fair comparison. Same thing with the Beatles Sgt. Pepper's. I mean, John Lennon was famous for saying, oh, you haven't heard Sgt. Pepper's till you've heard it in mono, but this is my Canadian mono original, which, I mean, it's in good shape, but I mean, it's still a Canadian pressing. It doesn't sound great, but I have this, this is a Japanese stereo pressing, which is clean. I think that's a little more defined, and this is the copy that I like a lot more, but I've heard by so many accounts that I should be looking for the mono pressing, but I just haven't had that opportunity to get both of them similar, great sounding pressings to do that comparison. It's really frustrating for me when, for the 50th anniversary of Sgt. Pepper's, Giles Martin redid the stereo mix, and instead of giving us both a stereo and mono mix in the same box set, they decided to do leftovers, alternative takes, that kind of thing as the second disc of the box set. And frankly, I just didn't buy it. I wasn't interested, whereas it would have been an instant buy for me if they had put the stereo and the mono together. One of the more interesting box sets I've purchased is this Buffalo Springfield that was put together by Neil Young. It's a 5 LP set. Buffalo Springfield only had 3 records, but 2 of them were recorded in both mono and stereo. So instead of giving us, a greatest hits compilation included in this, or all that extra studio outtakes, they did a stereo and mono of their self-titled and Buffalo Springfield again, plus Last Time Around. So I thought that was perfect. It was like, clearly Neil Young, who has kind of his ear to the ground with this community, he wanted this, and this is the way he wanted to present it. He's probably able to make a lot of money and satisfy his fans at the same time. With that being said, there are times when I have sought out these studio outtakes. I mean, we were talking about John Lennon earlier, but I picked this up. This is the Imagine John Lennon reissue they did a few years ago, which I still think is weird because it used to be like, okay, 50th anniversary of this Beatles record, this Paul McCartney record, this George Harrison record, let's do a deluxe edition. But this was like the 46th anniversary or something, like we gotta reissue it in like this 6 CD box set and stuff. But what's cool about this is it's a 2 LP set from the original master tape. I don't know how much to take that as, scripture anymore, but it sounds awesome to my ears. But personally, I'm not a huge fan of Imagine. I think it's way overproduced. I don't like the orchestral arrangements. But what they did was they put a second disc of straight from the tape, right from the studio cuts of a lot of these songs. So they're raw, and you get that energy and that grittiness that you want. So when you hear like How Do You Sleep, you're in the room with the musicians. It's unbelievable, and I would definitely recommend that. And in this case, I listened to the outtakes more than I listened to the actual record. They probably could have gone without putting multiple takes of the same song. I would have rather had it as it plays like the album, but they pick 1 or 2, and then I can go online, or they can include a download card if I want to hear the rest of the outtakes. But that was actually a good option. As well, this is another one that I picked up a few years back for Record Store Day. This was Miles Davis Double Image. This is complete recordings from the Bitches Brew sessions, where they took those studio outtakes where they recorded a bunch of different songs that didn't make it onto the actual record but have been floating around in different versions for a number of years, and they put it to vinyl, and I loved them and decided to purchase that. But I wasn't forced to purchase the main Bitches Brew pressing to get those. This was my choice. I decided that I wanted to get this and was able to. So I like that it was there as an option. And I know that oftentimes is for Record Store Day, we do get those kind of like outtakes, demos, alternative cuts, that kind of stuff. And I think that's more preferable because that allows the consumer to decide and not be forced to spend extra money to get the music that they want. And there are other more creative ways to get people to spend more money too. This is Iggy and the Stooges' Raw Power, one of the most important albums in the development of heavy, gritty music, punk rock. And if you know much about this album, it sounds terrible. David Bowie was the one who mastered it, and he did, frankly, a terrible job. They often say it's like every instrument sounds like it takes turns to be too loud in the mix. So in the late 90s, Iggy Pop went back in the studio with the master tape, and he mixed it the way that the band intended to, where every instrument is as loud and upfront as possible. And that's generally considered like maybe the more preferable version, but I needed to find out. I wanted to get both. They did this 2 LP set where you get both of them, and I got to play them back to back and decide that I like the Iggy Pop version better. I didn't have to search out 2 versions, and 2 versions that might not have anything in common other than the music, and decide that way. So this was great, and I'd love to see more stuff like this. There are creative ways to get us to spend more money. I'm really curious, what do you think? Like, are you willing to repurchase this and maybe purchase 2 different copies so that you can get the mono and stereo, and then you're forced to buy those outtakes? Whereas like for me, I feel like I'm probably gonna just get the mono mix because it's 1 LP, but I would rather have the stereo, but I don't want to spend that extra money. So I mean, what do you think? Is this something that deters you from buying records? Is it something that you love? Because I mean, there has to be an audience for this, and I'd love to hear people who actually do enjoy them saying, you know, oh, I love this artist, I need to hear how it developed, versus if I want to hear how it developed, I'd like to go hear that elsewhere, listen to it once, don't put it on my records, and I don't want it on my shelf. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.